this Orwellian, vast censorship enterprise. On multiple occasions, President Biden and his team have threatened to punish social media companies that did not sufficiently censor Biden's political opposition by revoking Section 230. Biden suggested Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg should be subject to civil liability and potential criminal prosecution for not censoring political speech. President Biden also repeatedly accused social media companies of, quote, killing people by not censoring enough disfavored speech. The Biden administration has threatened and attacked social media companies so that those social media companies would censor speech the Biden administration dislikes. Until the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit and later the Twitter files, the Biden administration's efforts to pressure and collude with social media companies was behind the scenes through meetings and emails and was unknown. On behalf of Missouri and Louisiana, I was proud to join with General Landry to sue the Biden administration for violating the First Amendment through this vast censorship enterprise. This lawsuit alleges the Biden administration, including President Biden himself and members of his team, pressured and colluded with social media giants to censor free speech in the name of combating so-called disinformation and misinformation, which led to suppression and censorship of truthful information on a scale never seen before. The lawsuit provides example after example of truthful information that was censored by social media companies that were admitted at a later date to be truthful or credible, including the Hunter Biden laptop story, the COVID-19 lab leak story, theory, and the efficacy of masks. Discovery made by Missouri and Louisiana demonstrated the Biden administration's coordination with social media companies and collusion with nonprofits to censor speech was far more pervasive and destructive than ever known. Documents reveal multiple White House officials, from the former press secretary to the general director, were relentlessly pressuring social media companies to remove specific posts or accounts or expand censorship practices. The White House wanted those censored when documented posts are false, even though Facebook found that the content did not violate its policies. The White House also asked for unfavorable news to be put, quote, in context with specific talking points, along with amplification of Biden administration messaging and FAQs. Missouri and Louisiana also deposed Dr. Anthony Fauci. This deposition showed that when Dr. Fauci spoke, big tech censored. For example, Dr. Fauci was aware early in the pandemic that his agency had funded dangerous gain-of-function research on the coronavirus at the Wuhan lab of Wuhan Institute of Virology, but he sought to discredit COVID-19 leaked from the lab to deflect blame and avoid potential responsibility for the pandemic. In his deposition, Dr. Fauci claimed 174 times that he could not recall, including about critical details related to gain-of-function research and other issues associated with the lab leak theory and the government's response to the pandemic. Because of Dr. Fauci's influence, social media platforms censored the lab leak theory and other COVID-19 viewpoints that Dr. Fauci and his cabal of experts disfavored. Missouri and Louisiana also deposed the FBI agent about the Hunter Biden laptop story. This deposition and relevant documents reveal that the FBI deliberately planted false information about hack and leak operations in advance of the Hunter Biden laptop story coming out in order to deceive social media platforms into censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story. The FBI also flagged social media accounts for censorship on a monthly basis and have an estimated 50% success rate in getting reported disinformation removed or censored. The Missouri versus Biden lawsuit also obtained documents revealing that multiple federal agencies have pressured and colluded with big tech or social media companies to flag and censor a large number of accounts and posts, especially related to public health and elections. The federal government has even created public-private partnerships to expand its censorship reach. Without the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit and the subsequent disclosures in the Twitter files, Americans would have never known about the Biden administration's coordination, collusion, and coercion to censor speech. President Biden and his administration made lust for its own ministry of truth, but I, along with millions of Americans, will never stop fighting for the God-given right to speak your mind, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Americans have enshrined the First Amendment in our Constitution more than 230 years ago, for good reason, and for times such as these. We cannot allow the Biden administration to infringe upon the freedoms that we cherish and that have been purchased by the sacrifice of millions of Americans. Freedom of speech is vital to our country and our people. In many ways, it's our pressure release valve. We must stop the Biden administration's threat to free speech so that America can remain the freest country in the history of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Mr. Attorney General, you're recognized for your 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plasek, and the distinguished members of this select subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, I would ask if I could correct the record quickly. Ms. Plasek fails to recognize that I submitted a letter of my own condemning all violence, all political violence, and urged my colleagues to do the same. Since I would remind everyone that violence throughout that past year had inflicted a lot of damage on other federal buildings as well. And so I would like to submit that letter for the record.
That's not a correction.
That little lady's out of order.
That's not a correction. I said you refused to join the
Order.
for attorney.
That old lady has not been recognized. Time belongs to the Attorney General from the state of Louisiana. Mr. Landry, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for the opportunity to join Congress today, along with my former colleague and now U.S. Senator Schmidt from Missouri, and Mr. Sawyer to discuss the findings of our federal government censorship case, Louisiana and Missouri versus Biden. Since I was sworn in as the Attorney General in 2016, I have been ringing alarm bells about big tech. In fact, in 2018, I led a bipartisan discussion of Attorney Generals about the dangers that I saw regarding big tech. It was a bipartisan, multi-state coalition. Back then, the big story was the election of President Trump, and some were quick to blame social media platforms, especially Facebook, for enabling fake news to spread. Then, social media was actively used to tip the scales in President Biden's favor in 2020, censoring real news, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story, among others. Despite all of this, federal agencies have been allowed to co-opt these private companies and use social media platforms to infringe upon the First Amendment rights of Americans. Let's look at the COVID-19 pandemic. During that time, Facebook had close to 3 billion users worldwide, with roughly 124 million in the U.S. alone. In 2021, 66% of U.S. adults used Facebook, while 23% used Instagram. Over 500 million tweets were posted daily during the pandemic by more than 340 million users on Twitter. On YouTube, roughly 500 hours of video content were uploaded every minute, with more than 4 billion hours of video viewed each month. More than 72% of U.S. adults used the platform. Why is this important? Because our lawsuit has uncovered a censorship enterprise that spans numerous government institutions and all major social media platforms. And that censorship enterprise has been widely successful in achieving its goals. White House Director of Digital Strategy, Robert Flattery, was impressed when YouTube reported their success in reducing watch time of borderline content by 70%. This is what we found in our case. The FBI claims a success rate of 50% in getting platforms to censor content flagged as misinformation. The election integrity. Partnership, now known as the Virality Project, bragged that 4 major platforms they worked with all had high response rates and that 35% of URLs shared with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube were either labeled, removed, or soft blocked. As a result of this collusion between social media companies and the CDC, NIH, NIAID, American citizens, scientists, and journalists were shadow banned, censored, silenced, and deplatformed for their valid concern about lockdowns and more. Robert Kennedy Jr., the nephew of a president, the son of the former U.S. Attorney General of this country, the nephew of a distinguished U.S. Senator, who, by the way, was a Democrat, was censored. Tucker Carlson, who hosted the top-rated primetime television news, was also censored, as so were millions of Americans, while deceitful and manipulative voices like Dr. Anthony Fauci were elevated. This censorship enterprise knows no bounds, and it's not limited in scope to COVID-19 or elections. Yet many of the committee members will sit here today and say, what can we do? I say, bring the federal government to heel. No one in this chamber on both sides of the aisle should be opposed to that. And I applaud this body's efforts and the chairman for passing the Protecting Speech and Government Interference Act. However, I would offer that it just doesn't go far enough. And I would ask those on the left to join in making it tougher. The time has come when we must hold federal employees and contractors and federal actors accountable by terminating both their jobs and their retirement for violating the First Amendment of American citizens. If they participate in violating American citizens' First Amendment rights, and that's what a court finds, then those are the penalties that should be imposed. This chamber should also draft legislation that will open a pathway for legal liability for such conduct, so that American citizens have a right of action against their own government in protecting their, and I repeat, their First Amendment rights. There must be a penalty, or this problem will never be solved. And if you would like to understand exactly how bad this problem has become, I invite you to read our satirical pamphlet, The Censorship Enterprise. The Future is Now, which is basically the federal government's guide to limiting disfavored speech. If you're not disturbed by that document, you're either complicit or contributing to the problem. But know that the state of Louisiana and Missouri are fighting back against this vast government censorship in our federal courts today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney General Lander. We appreciate